What's up, guys? Asian here again with another trial guide video. Today we're going to be going over Maw of Lorkhaj. So this is just going to be ad pulls. So this is just going to kind of go over how we're going to be stacking the ads as a tank, kind of discuss what you want to do as a tank, what sort of moves you want to avoid, things like that, and more importantly, how you're going to get everything to the assigned places. So there are diagrams down in the description below that kind of detail all of the ad positions. So they'll basically show you which ads you have, as well as which tank is taunting what and where you're going to be bringing them. But hopefully having this video up here will serve as a better visual guide along with those diagrams. So again, these are from a tank perspective. So if you're a DPS or a healer, basically your job is basically not to get in the way of the tanks. In particular, the two-hander. So the two-hander, also known as the Savage, does shatter armor, which basically reduces your armor all the way down to 0. So basically just removes all the armor that you are wearing, so you're only relying on ward and resolve, your major resistance buffs for your resistances. So that's kind of the one ad that you want to watch out for. So you kind of want to be a little bit away from the group up until especially away from that two-hander. So starting off here first with the first of the ad pulls. Is just like right off the bat, right when you enter the second room. Pretty simple, just a bunch of small ads, and once you kill them, you will start off with a Sun Eater, the Archer, and the Shadow Guard, which are the sword and boards. So this, typically speaking, the tanks will not taunt the Sun Eaters just because they don't want them to move around too much. And you always want to obviously get those Sun Eaters down first. And once you manage to get the Sun Eaters down, then you can start focusing everything else. Usually, most groups will have you focus the Sun Eaters down, then you focus on the Archers, the Dreadstalkers, and then you focus down sword and boards and the two-handers, depending on whether you have them all stacked in a group. It'll all depend on whether they get cleaved down as well. So a lot of the groups that I run with, Mayflower for instance, because we group everything up together, is basically allows us to, I feel a sneeze coming, basically by the time they get to the melee, because everything's stacked and all the cleave is there, we don't have to worry so much about having to focus down the melee down from 100% health. Now this is, again, the second ad pull, so we don't have any Savages yet, but this next ad pull is going to be where the Savages will start to appear. So you can see here that we do want to pull the Archers up here to the top of the hill if you can. This is pretty simple. You can just line of sight them up until they are on top of the hill. Now as a tank, it's particularly important that you, let's pause this here, it's particularly important that you face the Dreadstalkers away from the group. So you guys saw that kind of arrow spray that went out. That'll put a bleed on anybody who gets hit by it. Now it is possible to cleanse it, so you can use Purge to get rid of it. However, better off just to avoid it entirely. So just try to point them away from the group. Sometimes when you're stacking the ads, it's unavoidable. In that instance, as a DPS and a healer, you just want to kind of get out of those the conals, because it's not a complete conal sweep. There are some gaps there. Then after this ad pull, you have a Sun Eater on the left. So you can see Sun Eater. It's kind of hard to see because it is 720p here. This is a previous run about, this must have been at least 3 or 4 months ago now. So we have Sun Eater all the way on the left. You have 2 Archers, one right next to the Sun Eater, and then one up here between the 2 pillars, and then you have a sword and board and a two-hander. We're just going to go ahead now. So for some reason I have taunt on everything, which is not what I really want to have happen. So typically speaking, one tank will be responsible for taunting just the Savage, and then the other tank will be responsible for taunting the Archers and the sword and boards. Right, so that was kind of messy, and that was just because the other tank didn't taunt the Savage. But generally speaking, you just want to bring them back down to where we were over there. So let's back up 5 seconds, maybe a little bit more. So basically right around here is where you want to bring them. So basically what's going to happen is one tank is going to taunt the two-hander, the other tank is going to taunt the sword and board, and the 2 Archers, and you're just going to bring them back here. Basically, you're just going to line of sight the Archers down until they're basically right where the two-hander is. So that way, when they're throwing the Sun Eater, everything's nice and stacked, and they can just cleave everything down. Now we will skip over Zasasha. That's going to be in a separate video. All the bosses are going to be in separate videos. And we're going to keep on going on to the next ad pull. So starting here, this section here between Zatasha and the twins are the only places where you're going to see these ogres. Now the ogres do have some special mechanics here you kind of want to watch out for. So there's basically 3 types of ogres. The ogre brutes, which are basically just your typical ogres. They just do your melee attack. So you just taunt them and bring them into group. The other ogres, 2 ogres, are particularly dangerous. So you have the shaman and then you have the flesh render. So the shaman, will actually use melee attacks, but its most dangerous move is when it raises its hands in the air and basically showers basically anything around it with an AoE. So it'll raise its hand up and it'll basically shower every single ad that's up with an AoE that damages everybody. So it's really important to get those ogre shamans down, because the more ads that are up, the more AoEs you have, the more damage that's incoming. The flesh renders also attack with melee attacks, but they also have a scream move, which can be interrupted. So the scream move will actually knock everybody down and deal continuous damage while it's screaming. It can be interrupted while they're screaming, and can also be interrupted before it screams. So when we get to the first flesh render, I'll kind of show you guys what the animation you should be looking for in order to get that interrupt off. But for this first ad pull, you have this bunch of ogres here. It's a bunch of brutes and shamans, so you just basically just want to get everything all grouped together and focus that shaman down first. The shaman and the flesh renders are a little bit larger than the brutes, so that's one way you can kind of tell them apart. The shaman also has these kind of markings on them. And then after you kill these, you have a couple of ads that spawn. So there's a Sun Eater in the back. Make sure to grab that Sun Eater. There's an archer over here on the far left, sword board, 2-hander, and there's a second archer back over in this direction here where the Mayflower logo is. So basically what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to stack them stack them all on top of this far archer that's going to be spawning somewhere around here. Now with the Savage here, it was kind of hard to show you in that first ad pull with the Savage, just because the other tank didn't manage to taunt what he was needed to taunt, so I was basically taunting everything. But you saw there, if you just back up 5 seconds here. So right here he's going to do a smash and then dodge roll it. So that smash is what shatters your armor. So if you manage to dodge roll it, you actually won't shatter your armor at all. It'll count as though you just dodged the move, so it won't like just keep on trying to do it to you. Now it's very important that you get this timing down and you kind of practice this timing. So I do recommend, if you can, going in something like normal Maw, just plain normal, and just have your whatever tank is going to be taking this Savage and just practice timing that dodge roll, because you still get the armor shatter in normal. So what you want to do is, if we back up a little bit, I'll see if I can do it. Oh, wrong way. So you can see here that it'll actually lift the Maw up. So by the time he starts lifting his Maw up, so he basically shifts it off to one hand and kind of brings it up. If it's all the way up, by the time you dodge roll, it's too late. You're going to get your armor shattered. So you basically, right when you see that animation start to happen, that's when you want to dodge roll. So the window is actually pretty small. It's only about a second or so. So that's why I highly recommend before you start practicing these stacks to do it in normal Maw, and just kind of have your tank practice dodge rolling these shatters, because dodge rolling it basically avoid putting the shatter on anybody at all. And it does take a lot of practice to get that dodge roll down. As you can see here, I missed that dodge roll, even though it did seem like I did it on time. The fact is that I did miss it, because the hammer was all the way up, basically over his shoulder by the time I dodge rolled. So at that point, it is too late. I can't avoid it. So this is what the flesh runners look like. They basically have a helmet. These settings here are terrible. If I can just do that. So it has a helmet and it has the claws. So these are the flesh runners are the ones that have the screaming move, and those will knock people back and basically do damage. So you can see here he's turning red, and he's basically kind of like crouching down and kind of summoning the energy to shout, and that's basically what it all looks like. So when you see him start turn red and crouch down, that's when you just want to interrupt them. So don't just spam the bash button either. Spamming the bash is never a good idea, because then you just start wasting stamina. There is a little bit of a cooldown, so just wait until you actually see him start to crouch down before you bash, so that way you're not wasting any more stamina than you have to. Now for this next ad pull, you have a Sun Eater right there at the pillar, so you just want to taunt that, and then you have the sword board, and then the 2-hand, and you're just going to bring them all over to the archer that's all the way down here. can see there I did miss the dodge roll on that one, so my armor is shattered. So I believe OBS crapped out there, so that's kind of why we had to skip there. Now for this particular ad pull, so this is a set of 4 rounds of ads, and if you wipe on any of them, you have to start all the way back from the beginning. So it's pretty important that you try not to wipe as best you can. So there is a Shaman that will spawn, I believe it spawns over by the cave, which is to our left. Then you have a Flesh Render that spawns right here. And then these 2 are just brutes. So what you want to do is basically just want to bring the Flesh Render over to where the first Sunny is going to spawn, which is going to be right over there. So that's what happens when you don't hit the, when you don't get the interrupt in time. In that instance, the brutes were kind of inside the Flesh Render, so it was kind of hard to target it. But you can interrupt it while it's screaming if you have Crushing Shock or something like that. Or you can see here it actually does slow you while he's screaming. Basically, just want to bring the Flesh Render up here where the Sunny first spawns, and then when the Flesh Render dies, you're already all right here with the Sunny. So Sunny goes ahead and spawns down. Then you have a sword board over here, and then a 2-hander over there, and then an archer right here. And basically, what you're going to want to do is just want to bring all of the melee ads back, basically right where the Sun Eater was. You can see there I did miss the shatter, so that basically means everybody who is nearby had their armor shattered, so it's really important that you practice that dodge roll, so that way you don't accidentally kill everybody. Now this second set of ads here is also, I believe, all ogres. You have 2 Flesh Renders. You have one that spawns from this door right here, and then one that spawns over by the cave. So one tank should take 1 each and start interrupting it. There's also a Shaman that spawns right here at the door as well. So the idea is to just basically stack them all up. There's no real place that you want to stack them. We generally just stack them right in the middle. So you can see here that this round can be particularly dangerous if you don't manage to interrupt the Flesh Renders correctly because of all of the AoEs that are going out. You can see the Shaman is just throwing out all these AoEs out. So if you miss the interrupts, particularly if you miss both of them, then it can become quite dangerous to everybody, especially if you have the Shaman doing its thing. Now for this particular next ad phase, this is also a very difficult one. So you have one Shaman that comes out of the door here. You have a Sun Eater, that's this little ball right here. It's actually going to spawn right here. So what one thing's going to do is they're actually going to taunt the Flesh Render as well. There's going to be a Flesh Render that spawns. I believe it spawns over by the cave, I believe, as well as a Savage. So one tank, so here's the Flesh Render and the Shaman, they spawn next to each other, so you just want to make sure to keep them right on top of the Sun Eater so they both die. And you have a Savage that spawns over there. And you can see I'm just trying to get it over. So for this particular instance, this is another instance where one tank is going to need to take the Flesh Render, the other tank is going to have to take the Savage, and that's just because it is basically impossible for one tank to take both the Savage and the Flesh Render at the same time, especially because of that armor shatter as well as the interrupt mechanic as well. Now for this final ad pull, this is going to be 2 Sun Eaters. So basically what's going to happen here is you have 2 Sun Eaters, so you have one that's going to spawn right here, and then one that's going to spawn at the base of the hill here. Then you have 2 sword boards and an archer. So what basically is going to happen is everyone's basically going to be standing back a little bit, and then you're just going to taunt the archer and the Sun Eaters and just kind of stack them all up. So in this instance, one of the Sun Eaters decided to basically follow somebody, so we couldn't stack them right here. But generally speaking, that's basically where you want to stack them, right where the base of the hill, where that Sun Eater is. So in this instance, we just had to adapt because the Sun Eaters weren't playing nice. And once the Sun Eaters are dead, we move these sword boards over to where the archers are. And so once we kill this archer, that's basically all the ads, and then you're on to the twins. So again, we're not going to be going over the twins. That's going to be for a separate video. I believe we wipe once. And so this is the next ad pull here. This is basically very similar to the previous ad pull, where if you wipe here, you will have to start the entire round all over again. So this is basically like a boss fight. So you do have those two big cats. So those two big cats, when they attack you, they'll target one random person, and if they manage to hit you, it's going to be a one-shot, even to the tank. So there's two strategies that people use. The first one is just to run around, so that way the cat can never get you. The other strategy is what we're doing right here, which is basically you're going to be dodge rolling the cats when they try to hit you. So very similar to the Savage, you kind of want to make sure you're dodge rolling before they kind of rear up. If you dodge roll in the middle of the rear, then there's a possibility that you're going to die. So this is generally going to be faster, but it's also a lot more dangerous. So if you're going for score, vitality is very important for score, so I don't recommend doing that particular strategy if you're going for score. Now for this particular ad pull, you have two sides. So you have a left side, which is generally what most groups use first, and then you have a right side, which is obviously the other side. There's a chain up here that you have to pull, and that's going to spawn 3 waves of ads. So we're just going to go ahead and yank the chain here. And so the left side is generally considered to be harder than the right side. So on this left side here, you have a Sun Eater that spawns. Make sure to get that, as well as a Savage. Generally speaking, you're just going to be keeping the Savage on top of the Sun Eater. That way it dies to cleave. And then when the Savage is done, you're going to basically be spawning it, stacking it right on top of the archers as well. So the other tank is going to be stacking the archers over here. There are a couple of methods you can use to kind of stack them. We try to stack them over here, but there's actually can't show you, but there's a little lip right over there that you can use to kind of stack the archers as well. So here you have 2 Sun Eaters. So what a lot of groups do as DPS, so they'll kind of time their Destro ultis out. So basically what they'll do is they'll have 2 people do their Destro ults first for this particular ad pull, so that way we can kill the Sun Eaters really quickly. And then we'll usually save the last couple of Destros, last 2 Destros for this last pull. So this last ad spawn here, there is a delayed spawn. So there's going to be 2 Sun Eaters that spawn a couple of seconds afterwards. So if we go ahead and wait, because here now, there they are. So you have the 2 Sun Eaters plus the Savage. So since Sun Eaters pretty much spawn on top of each other, we just basically try to stack everything on those Sun Eaters and just Destro the crap out of every single ad that's over there. Now the hard part is probably going to be if the Sun Eaters happen to aggro on somebody who's far away, they might follow that person and they'll be out of the stack, in which case you're just going to have to try to adapt and try to stack them on top of the Sun Eaters as best you can. Now the right side here doesn't have Sun Eaters on each and every pull. It's only the first and the third one that has Sun Eaters. So this first one here you can see is a Savage, Swordboard, Sun Eater, and a Archer. And again, we just want to stack everything right on top of that Sun Eater if we can. And I can see here I am being late on those dodge rolls. So again, if his maul is over his shoulder, by the time you dodge roll, then it's going to be too late. You were a little bit too slow on this. Now for this one, you have I think 1 Sun Eater. Then you have 2 Swordboards and an Archer, or might be 1 Swordboard and 2 Swordboards and 2 Archers. There's no Savage to have to deal with here. Just a lot of AoEs. And again, you just want to stack everything on top of the Sun Eaters if you can, because those are going to be what we're targeting first, so we'll be able to cleave them down that way. Now, much like the left side, there's going to be a delayed spawn, so that Sun Eater was going to spawn on the second wave a couple of seconds after this first wave here. This one does have a Savage you're going to want to taunt. And this one does have 3 Archers as well as 1 Sword and Board. So again, just want to make sure to stack the everything in basically on top of that Sun Eater that spawns. It's only the 1 Sun Eater, so it's not as bad as the left side where you have 2 Sun Eaters. And that's pretty much it. So you can see here we try to basically use line of sight to basically line up the ads, which usually works out in our favor. So it's easier just to use line of sight, but there are a couple of areas where you can just kind of like line of sight them by ducking around a corner or something. Now for this final ad pull here, this is another ad gauntlet, so this is known as the Gauntlet. This is another 3 waves of ads. And there's Sun Eaters on all of the waves. There's 1 Sun Eater on the first wave, 2 on the second, and 2 on the third. And this is going to be the last ad pull. And much like the previous 2 ad pulls, this is going to be considered as a boss run, because if you do wipe here, you will have to start all over from the beginning. Now, there is a strategy that some groups may use in order to make sure they save their progress, so to speak, and that's to leave 1 person actually outside of this room here. So that way, you'll be able to basically start where you left off instead of going all the way back to the beginning. I am not sure if that has been fixed, but last time I checked, it wasn't. First Sun Eater spawns on the far right, and then you're basically going to be taunting all of the melee and the range. So there's an archer, a sword and board, and a 2-hander. Just going to bring them over where the next Sun Eater is going to spawn. This next one has 2 Sun Eater spawns, and they're going to be on opposite sides of the arena. So there's going to be 1 right here, and then there's going to be 1 over here. Now there's going to be 2 2-handers here, so 1 tank's going to take 1, and the other tank's going to take the other, and they're going to be spawning way back here. So you can see 1 on the right, 1 on the left, and then you have that 1 archer back here as well. Now sometimes you can try to be a little bit crazy here and try to get both savages like I am here, but that is quite risky because their smash timers are going to be off by a little bit, so it's going to be a lot harder to dodge roll everything. So it's usually just better for each tank to take 1 savage. And now finally, this is going to be the final ad pull here. So this also has 2 Sun Eaters, so 1 on the left, 1 on the right. Then you have a savage and a sword and board in the middle. And then you have an archer in the entrance and archer in by the exit. So generally speaking, you're just going to take everything over to the exit archer. You're just going to line of sight that entrance archer all the way back to the exit archer here. So these ad pulls are probably going to be the more difficult ad pulls, just because of all of the ads that are out. As well as the 2 Sun Eaters that are out. So you can see here it does become fairly filled with chaos. But it is possible to recover from it as long as you have your tanks that are still up. Now, in this particular instance, the Sun Eater is still alive, and that's usually what's going to get your group if the Sun Eater is still alive. Mainly because if the Sun Eater is up, the negates are going to be placed down, and you can have, I think, 2 negates out from 1 Sun Eater, except that first negate will probably last only another few seconds. If you have 2 negates out. So depending on your group DPS and how many people are alive, how many people are dead, it might be better off to actually focus on the Sun Eaters and kill the Sun Eaters first before going for the reses. It's really up to the raid leader's call. My personal call is if the Sun Eater is almost dead and we have no more than 2 people down, then I'll just say kill the Sun Eaters, then go for the reses. But again, each raid lead has their own sort of way of doing things. And so this is the final ad pull basically. So you can see here that this ad pull can be quite difficult to deal with. So you can see we just decided to kill the Sun Eater and before going for any more additional reses. And if one of the tanks is down and you do have the savage on you, it's better just to kite him around, just basically run around and dodge roll his heavies and his armor smashes when you get them. Alright, so that's pretty much all the ad pulls in vMaw. So again, I will have kind of diagrams down in the description below, so you guys can have a kind of another visual guide here. But this is kind of more advanced tactics. This is just kind of the stacks that a lot of endgame groups use in order to kind of speed up the ad pulls a little bit. They can be a little bit dangerous, as you saw there, because all the ads are stacked together. If you do miss the dodge roll on the savage, then you can risk wiping the group or wiping a lot of people. So if I would recommend practicing these stacks on normal first until your tank gets used to the dodge rolling timing. and then moving on to vet. And if you're still having trouble dodging the smash, then just bring the savage out of group and just stack everything else as you would normally stack them. So that's it for this video. Hope you guys found this informative. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comment section below, and I will see you guys in the next dungeon.